Okay, this week it is week 8, and we are going to be focusing on really security this week. We're going to be talking about creating users and granting roles and privileges. And this is one of the most important things that a DBA does, controlling access to the database, the objects inside of the database, and the type of operations that users can perform on the database is extremely important. The reason it's important, one, is just controlling access to data. So a lot of times databases will contain data that is sensitive in nature and can only be viewed by certain people. So it is important to make sure that you can control access to that data. The other function that is really important is only certain people should be allowed to do certain types of operations on the database. If someone has DBA privileges and has bad intent, they can delete objects from your database. And obviously, in a production scenario where an organization has critical database, if someone were to intentionally or accidentally delete data or objects that were critical to a business or a business process, then that would be a very bad thing. So controlling access to objects and the type of operations that certain users can perform is an extremely important function. And so we need to get comfortable with really how it works. And so Koivo has volunteered again tonight to be my kind of guinea pig here while we explore this topic, which is really chapter 8 in our textbook, where we'll be looking at a number of the concepts that our textbook's author is covering. So really the very first thing that we're going to talk about is the ability to create a user. And in the database, there's a number of different ways, that we could do this. We can write scripts to create a user manually. We can use SQL Developer to kind of have it help us create a user. We can use our Enterprise Manager, which we talked about quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, to view, to create users as well. So there's a number of different interfaces that we could use. Tonight we're going to sort of start off and focus on just writing a script to do it, and then we'll be kind of interacting with SQL Developer and perhaps even Enterprise Manager to kind of see what happens when we do that. So I guess, Koivo, before we get going too far, let's make sure that we get Enterprise Manager up and going in Firefox as well. So if you could open Firefox. And then if you hit the drop down in your address bar there, you should be able to see. Last week when we were doing this, we set up our both our container base and our pluggable database. So you can see down there you've got port 5504. That's going to be our pluggable database that we're going to want to work with tonight. So if you'll go down about maybe 5-6 entries where it says localhost 5504 there. Down 2 more. There you go, right there. All right, and then we're going to log into Enterprise Manager as sys and as sysdba. So, yep, enter your password, and then we'll check the as sysdba. And so last week, in week 7, we really covered how to make sure that you could get into Enterprise Manager and how we could set a port for our pluggable databases so we could access those through Enterprise Manager as well. And tonight we're just going to kind of continue to use this interface, and we'll kind of observe what's going on as we're entering commands into SQL Developer. We can sort of follow along in here as well and see kind of what the effect of doing that is. So, Koivu, let's go back to SQL Developer. So if you just want to minimize this, yeah, or just click on that, that's perfect. And you can see here that we are logged into MyPDB1, our pluggable database on MyPDB1, our root database. So we're going to be using our MyPDB1 pluggable database on that root to perform a lot of our operations. So it's really quite simple to create a user, and Koivu, if you just want to type this in, it's as easy as saying create user.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's caps or not, so it's not a case-sensitive operation. And then we just need to create a name for our user. So we'll call our user my new user, and there you go. And then the only other thing that we really have to do is give this user a password. And the way that you do that is with the identified by clause. So if you'll type identified and then space by, yep. And then we just need to give it a password. And let's just call it my new password. And then if you'll just put a semicolon at the end of this and separate our commands. Now if we execute this command, we should create a new user on our database. So go ahead and just click the green play or hit Control Enter. And now you can see, hey, it's created my new user. So if we were to look in a DBA table for users, we would actually be able to see that this user has been created. So we can go ahead and do that. So go ahead and hit enter. And hit it one more time. And let's just do select and then star from, and you can see it's starting to help you out there. So an asterisk and from, and then we can just say DBA underscore users. We can put a semicolon at the end of that.
Users?
Yeah, users.
S?
Yep, with an S. And then you can go ahead and execute that command. Now we get a big list of the users that's in our database. And we can see if we look here that we're fetching 44 rows. And if you scroll down here, Koivu, we should see my new user. So yeah, you just went by it. So scroll up just a touch. All right, and there's our user right there. And we can see that we've created our my new user, and it says the account status is open. And so we would kind of assume at this point that we ought to be able to use this user, right? So one of the things we can do is actually see if we can actually do that, right? So Koivu, over there on the left-hand side, where your connections are, go ahead and right-click on your sys on my PDB1. Yeah, right-click on that and just say Properties. Okay, and so you missed just a little bit, but that's no problem. We can change this easily. So for the connection name here, what I want you to do is actually type in my new user.
My what?
My new user, and we're just going to name this connection name after the user that we just created, and then your username will also be my new user. And then your password is going to be the my new password that we created. And then we can see down in our service name there that we just kind of missed by one with our with the connection that we were using here, but that's no big deal. We'll just change our service name to make sure that we connect to the right instance. So down there on the service name box, go ahead and click in there, and where it says my PDB1 on my CDB2, just change that 2 to a 1. And now go ahead and click Save. So now we have created a new connection for our new user, and the question we have is, okay, can we actually connect with this user? So go ahead and click Test. Now there's two things that are really wrong here, but the number one thing that's wrong is we can see that the role that we're using in our connection is not going to be okay for anybody other than users that have the sysdba role connected with their account. So for that role drop down there, I want you to go ahead and hit the drop down where it says role, about middle of the dialog box there.
Right here?
Nope, down there. Yep, see where it says role right there in the middle, and it says sysdba. And go ahead and hit that drop down, and we're going to select default. So now we know we've gotten rid of this problem because our my new user does not have sysdba privileges. And let's go ahead and click Save again, and then let's test our. And yeah, just go ahead and overwrite it. That's fine. Just say yes. Now let's go ahead and click the test name. All right. So now we can see that the sort of password error has gone away, the username password. It has told us that, and if you try to connect with that sysdba role and you don't have it, it'll always kind of give you that password error. But now we're seeing that apparently our new user that we created lacks this create session privilege. And so it's denying us the ability to actually connect to the database from an external source, right? So it's entirely possible to create user accounts and schemas on our database that don't have the permission to connect from an external tool. And there's lots of reasons that we'll do this. One might be that we want to create a place to store a number of tables and just grant other users the ability to work in that space that we've created. So a user and a schema are often used interchangeably when you're talking about the database. You can really just think of it as a place where you can store objects inside the database, and then a user can also be an actual user that has permissions to perform a number of operations. So first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to try and fix our user so that he or she can connect. So go ahead and just click cancel here, Pueblo. And let's go take a look at the user that we created. So if you will expand your connection there for sys on my PDB1 on my CDB1. So the next connection down, if you'll hit the plus sign to expand that out. There you go. And if you scroll down on this area at the bottom, we should see users. And then if we go ahead, or other users, excuse me, and if we go ahead and expand other users, we'll be able to scroll down again and we'll see the user that we just created. So there's our My New User, and now you can right click on that user and we can actually choose to edit this user. So let's go ahead and select edit. And this will pull up a dialog box that really makes it easier for you to execute a number of commands, but we could certainly write all of these commands manually, and in a lot of cases people prefer that. But if you're new to managing the database, this can be a super handy way of kind of teaching yourself how to do some of this stuff, because as we'll notice, the last tab in this dialog box is SQL. And really all SQL Developer does for you when you are kind of using these automated dialog boxes is it writes the SQL that needs to be executed against the database in order to perform the task. So if you want to learn how to do some of these operations, this is kind of a great way to learn. So right here on this first tab, we can see we've got our user tab, and there's a number of things here we could do. We could set a new password, we could expire a password, we could lock the account, we can choose the default table spaces for a user, and then the next tab over is the granted roles. So if you'll click on the granted roles there, Koivo.
Which one?
The granted roles tab in the, so just go up about 2-3 inches. Yep, there you go. And now we can see all of these roles that are available to us. Now, if you'll remember, there was one, kind of two things that we're looking for. And our dialog box told us when we tried to connect that our user lacked the ability to create a session. So if we take a look at the system privileges, the next tab over, we can see that there are a number of privileges that we can grant to our users here. So if you'll just scroll down a little bit here, Koivo, we'll look and see if that create session privilege exists. And so keep scrolling down a little bit. And as you can see, there are a very large number of privileges that are available to us. So now here we go. We see this create session system privilege. So now if we check this under that first checkbox for granted, now we can see, now we are attempting to grant this privilege to our user. And if we wanted to see the SQL that we would write to do that, we can now click on the SQL tab at the very end there. So Koivo, go ahead and click on SQL, and you'll see that we are seeing this SQL statement here, grant create session to my new user. So we could apply this here, or we could just as easily copy this out and execute it in our SQL worksheet sheet. But we're going to go ahead and just click apply here. And it's telling us it's successfully processed our SQL command. So now we need to go and see, all right, can we actually connect with this user? So go ahead and click OK. And now let's scroll up on the left-hand side for our connections, and let's attempt to connect with the connection that we created for our My New User. So go ahead and just click the plus sign next to My New User, and that will, the very top connection. Yep, click the plus sign there, and then now we see that it has actually logged our My New User in to the database. So first thing we kind of see there is that the create session is a pretty imperative privilege for our users to have if we want them to be able to connect to the database. So go ahead and click the tables folder underneath that connection, and let's see what we see here. So now what this is showing us is, hey, this user doesn't have any tables that he or she has created yet. And we would see basically if we went down all of these tabs or all of these folders, that this user hasn't actually created anything in the database. So if we wanted to create something, we could write a pretty simple create table command. So Koivo, let's go ahead in the SQL worksheet that was opened for our My New User, write a quick and easy create table command.
Right here?
So go ahead and, yep, go ahead and write create and then space, and you can see that the editor here is trying to auto complete for us, which is great, can be very handy at times. But yep, and you can actually you could actually select one of those if you wanted to. So go ahead and select the third one down there. Yep, go ahead and just double click that. So then you can see that the editor's kind of written a statement for us, right? It's just giving you a bunch of examples of things that you could do. But really what, we're saying right here is, hey, we would like to create a table. Our table's name is T. We are going to put a column in this table, and it is going to be of the data type number. Our column name will be C. So, most of the time we're not going to name things in such a simplistic fashion. So instead of T, Koivo, why don't we put my table? And then just to sort of clarify what's going on here too, instead of C inside of those brackets, let's put my column. There you go. And now let's go ahead and see if we can execute this command. So what's happened here is we have discovered again that, hey, we don't have the privileges that we need to perform the operation that we're trying to do. So the editor is actually telling us here that exactly that. Hey, you don't have the privileges to create a table in your own schema, and you need to talk to your DBA about that. Being that we are our DBA, we can fix this problem pretty easy. So Koivo, if you would go back to the user dialog on, scroll down to our sys connection over there, and let's go take a look at our new user one more time, and let's see if we can see how we might hook this user up so that that user could create a table. So scroll on down, scroll all the way down there to our user. Yep, and you just need to scroll down to my new user. And then when you get down there, let's go ahead and right click on my new user and let's see if we can figure out the permission that we need. So now we're going to go edit user, and we're going to look at the system privileges, and we're going to scroll down to look for something with create, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. So let's see if we can find something for create. Now, first thing you'll see is, hey, there's a create any, and you have to be very cautious of these create any privileges, right? Because what that means is I can perform this operation for any user or any schema on the entire database, right? So if we scroll down and we see create any table, just keep scrolling down there a little bit, Koivo. Right there we see create any table. Well, if we were to grant this permission to this user, we would actually be saying, hey, this user can create a table anywhere they want to in this whole database. So they can create one as Scott, they could create one as any of the users that we have. And that's not what we're really trying to do a lot of the times when we're working with a particular user, and especially in a development situation. So if you keep scrolling down, what we'll find out is after all of these create any privileges, we'll get to ones that are more granular and only apply to the user within their own schema. So if you scroll down here, you'll see that there is a create table permission. So go ahead and check the box for that create table. And then let's take a look at our SQL that is generated after we check that box. So go up to the SQL tab. And now you can see that we're granting the create table privilege to my new user. So go ahead and click apply. And then say OK. And then let's try and execute this create table command one more time. All right. So now it says, hey, you've gone ahead and created a table. And at this point, we should be able to use this table, right? So go ahead and hit enter twice, and then let's try an insert command here. So insert into my table. And then we're just going to say, we're going to put my column in parentheses here. So just go ahead and select that my. Yep. Yep, you'll need to get your spelling right there. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. And then after the parentheses that you have there, go ahead and type the word, delete that semicolon quick. And then let's put a space in there and type the word values. And we're going to put the open parentheses again, and we're going to put the number 1 in there. So open paren, the number 1, close paren, and then a semicolon. All right, so let's go ahead and try and execute this command. All right, so now basically what it's telling us is our user does not have the privileges it needs to actually be able to insert a value into the table that he created. And so the number 1 question on that is going to be like, well, why is that? So now let's go back to where we were editing the user Koivo over there on the left-hand side. And let's open up our My New User one more time and see why this might be. Okay, so if we click on the Quotas tab, we're going to see that, hey, we know that the default table space for this user is users, because that's the default table space for all new users on the database. And we haven't specified otherwise, and we could double check that by clicking on the user tab. And we already saw that our default table space was users. But what we see here is that our user doesn't actually have the ability or hasn't been granted any space permissions on any of these table spaces. So let's go ahead and check unlimited next to users, our bottom table space. So nope, the bottom one. And we could grant the user permission to a number of them. And then let's take a look at our SQL tab one more time and see what's being produced. So now you can see that we're altering the user and we are granting the user the permission to use as much space as they want to on the user's table space. So now let's go ahead and click Apply. And now let's go ahead and see if we can execute that command one more time. All right, so now that we see that we have actually inserted a row into our table. And if we wanted to, we could actually do a select statement from this. So now, Koivo, go ahead and hit enter 2 times. And let's do select star from my table and end at the semicolon. Yep, and semicolon. And now let's go ahead and execute this command. And we can see that, hey, look at that. There's the number 1 in my table. All right. So this kind of demonstrates a couple of things here. One is what they begin to talk about in the next chapter as well, is these sort of Ddl and Dml operations. And we can actually demonstrate something that's pretty interesting here. Go ahead and copy that select star from my table, and let's put it into our SQL worksheet that is for our sys user on my PDB1. So go ahead, yep, click on that, and let's hit enter, yep, and go ahead and paste it in there. Now, if we just execute this command as it is right now, we'll go ahead and do that, Koivo. You're going to see that it tells us that, hey, this table doesn't exist because we are using our sys user right now. And although our sys user has permissions all over the database, when we reference an object without prefixing it with its schema or user, then the editor is going to assume that we are talking about that user's schema. And obviously in the sys schema for our sys user has not created a table called my table. So in front of my table there, Koivo, go ahead and type my new user and a period. So it should end up being my new user dot my table. So yeah, go ahead and put it in front of the my table. Or you can just type, yeah, my table. and then go ahead and delete the my table in the, yep, there you go. And now let's see what happens when we execute this command. So now two very interesting things are going on here. So one, we have referenced the right object, right? We're not getting an error anymore that says the table doesn't exist. But what's odd is we're not seeing the value that is inserted into the table. And there's a very specific reason why this is, because one of the sort of central tenets in a relational database is the idea of a transaction, right? And what that means is that you can do a number of operations on the database, like inserting data, and if you are successful in completing that transaction, you can commit it to the database and make it available for everybody else to see. But in the case of, say, something goes wrong or there's some business rule or some reason why you don't want to complete a transaction, you have the ability to roll that transaction back. And so if, Koibo, you would click on your My New User SQL worksheet one more time, we'll see that there's two little sort of icons here right below our tab here. So we've got the green play arrow for executing things, and then we can see that there's kind of a little database icon there with a green check mark, and there's one with a red arrow. And so the first one said commit, and the second one said rollback. Go ahead and click the rollback, the one with the red arrow. There you go. Go ahead and click that.
All right, click it. One more time.
Yeah, try it one more time. Let's see if it missed you. Okay, so we've clicked rollback, and it should have essentially issued a command to roll this back. So now go ahead and run that select star from my table one more time. And now we can see that we've actually rolled this transaction back. We've said no, for whatever reason, we don't want to commit this transaction to the database. So we're going to go ahead and undo it, right? So now if you click the, let's execute the insert into my table command one more time. So that next command up, let's go ahead and insert our value back into the table. All right, and you can see that we've inserted a row, and if we were to do a select star from my table, again, we would see that that value is there. But this time, instead of rolling it back, we're going to commit it. So go ahead and click the little icon with the green checkbox. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've actually issued a commit to the database, which means we have determined that we want this transaction to happen, and now it should be available to all other users of the database. So Koibo, let's go ahead and click on the SQL worksheet for our sys user one more time. Yep. And now let's go ahead and execute this command one more time. And now we can see, hey, our user has committed his transaction, and the value that he's put into the database is now available to all to see. And so this is a very important thing, and we're not going to dig into it too much, but understand that this is a very critical operation when it comes to relational databases. This ability to have multiple people working on the database at multiple times and only see those transactions which have been deemed completed is really central to the idea of having what's called being atomic on the database. So be aware of this and understand that when you are doing these type of operations, if you want to make them available to really anyone outside of the session that you have created with the database, you have to commit them back to the database. So okay, we've created our user, we've given it the permission to connect, and we've also given our user the ability to insert and values into the database by giving our user permission on a table space and allowing that user to actually consume space. So the next thing that we want to do is really begin to talk about other permissions that we might be interested in. So we've given our user the ability to create a table, but what if our user wants to do some other operations? So let's go ahead and you'll find these a number of these things in Chapter 8, and I encourage you to look at the textbook because it has the stuff that we're trying to do. Now, the next thing I want to do is I actually want to add some more commands or add some more permissions for our user. So let's go ahead and actually go into that user dialog one more time, and let's see what other permissions that we might be interested in having this user possess, right? Because maybe this user is a developer and we want to give them the ability to do some more stuff. So go ahead and click Edit User, and then let's go to our system privileges one more time. And now let's scroll down and see what other type of create commands exist. So we'll go by all of our alters, and now we can see that there's let's go by our create any's. Okay, and all right, so right here we can see there's a number of database objects that we can create, and there's a number of different reasons you might be using, right? So if you scroll down just a little bit farther, we can see these create cube and create cube dimension and those type of commands. All right, go ahead and stop right there. And those are really related to what's called the OLAP version or portion of the database, which gives us this ability to create the objects that we would need for data warehousing if we're interested in that. Now, the other commands that we can see here is we can see this ability to create a synonym, to create a table space, to create a trigger. We can see the ability to create rules, create sequences, and a number of these things become very handy when it comes to being able to develop, right? So a sequence is a structure which allows the database to create an auto-incrementing number. So you can imagine a lot of scenarios where you might want to create what's called a primary key or a unique identifier on a table, and you might use something like a sequence, which will just sort of automatically increment by 1 or by 10 or whatever amount you tell it to create that field or create that value that you can then place in a field on a table. A trigger is an object which actually allows us to trigger an event based on another event. And typically this is used where if we are inserting a row into a table, we may want to automatically generate a value from a sequence that we put into a different column on that same row of the table. So go ahead and scroll down a little bit more. And then we can see that there's this, okay, go ahead and stop. We can create types, which is the ability to create a structure that can be used for a column in a table. So if you think about a type like a number or a date or a character, or what's field, these are all things that we're pretty familiar with. But you can actually go ahead and create your own types and use those in tables as well. So you can create really nested tables or structures that hold sort of multiple values, and then use them just like you would any of the other types like dates or numbers that we're used to using. We can also see that there's just a whole pile of commands here that we could use: create user, create view. Now, creating a view is another pretty important operation for users to be able to do, because there's a lot of times where we might want to combine the results of several tables together, and then make it easy to for other users to select those results. And the way that we'll typically do that is with a view, where we can kind of bury complicated SQL statements inside of another object, so that users don't have to kind of be concerned with doing those type of operations. So go ahead and just keep scrolling down here, and let's take a look at the other types of permissions that are on here. So we can see that there's a number of drop permissions, which really allow us the ability to delete objects on the database. And then if we keep going, we can see that there's a number of permissions around the ability to use objects across the database, and a lot of things that may or may not be valuable to a user. We may want to only grant these to particular people, but the idea is that we can actually grant a number of different permissions based on whether or not we need those permissions. We can get very granular about the type of things that a user can do on the database. So for our developer, what we really want to do is kind of grant some basic capabilities that we know is going to make it pretty easy for them to do their job. So go ahead and scroll up again, Koivo, and let's just add a few more permissions to our user here. So we're going to go up to, stop right there. I'll go up just a little bit farther to the create. Yep, right there. So we're going to make sure that our user can create a view and create a trigger and a type. So go ahead and click the checkbox next to create view. And then let's check the one next to create type and trigger. Yep. So click that one, and the next one up for trigger. And we'll go ahead and also make sure that we can create procedures and functions. So go ahead and scroll up just a little bit farther. And we want to select that, yep, create procedure. And then I think that's a pretty good start for our user here. You know what, maybe we'll give them the ability to create a materialized view as well, just for fun. So go ahead and click materialized view. And now let's take a look at our SQL. So now you can see that we're going through and we're creating all of these permissions for our user. And this time, instead of executing this in here, Koivo, what I want you to do is let's actually go ahead and copy these all of those grant statements out and put them into our SQL worksheet for our SIS user. So you can go ahead and copy that, and then you can click close. And then, yeah, go ahead and let's just paste these right into this SQL worksheet here. Yeah, go ahead, enter. All right. So we missed the G on our first one there. Let's go ahead and on that very first line, click that grant create trigger. Let's see, you want to go up, yeah, go ahead and put the G in there. So, all right, we know we have all of these, yep, type of G. All right, we know we have all these new sort of permissions that we want to grant to our user. We also want to, so let's go ahead and just highlight all of them and execute. So if you highlight all of these grant statements, you missed the G, yep, there you go. Highlight them all. And go ahead this time, instead of clicking that green arrow up there, click the icon right next to it, which is a run script. So click that one. All right, and what you can see it's done is it's just gone through and executed each of these grants in sequence. And now our new user will have all of these permissions. So we know that we have also granted our user the ability to create a session and also to create a table. So what's interesting about that is, okay, now if we wanted to create a new user and we wanted to give that user these same permissions, we can see pretty quickly that it would get kind of annoying, right? Or not so much annoying as it just gets kind of hard to sort of go through and grant these individual permissions to users. So if we had a bunch of developers and we wanted to, whenever we got a new developer, grant them the permission to do these things, then we would need to sort of remember what all the permissions were to the developer role, and then, oh, if we found a permission that we forgot and we needed to update it, then we'd have to go through and update all of our developers and give them all the permissions that we need. And so what they've kind of done to deal with this is created a thing called a role, right? Which is a way for us to group a number of permissions into a single object called a role, and then instead of granting individual permissions to users on the database, we can then instead just grant that role to a particular user. So the way that we do that is actually pretty simple. So go ahead and Koivo, and go to the very end of your statement there, and let's hit enter a couple more times. So click at the, oh, yeah, hit Control Z. Let's get all those back, and then just click at the very end there. Yep, and go ahead and hit enter. And this time, we're going to actually create a role to do this. So let's create a role. So type create, and then role. Role, R-O-L-E. Yep. And then let's call this role developer. All right. And put a semicolon. And now let's go ahead and execute this statement. All right, so now we've got a role created, but we haven't granted any permissions to it. So now up there where we have these grant create, let's go ahead and go to the very top of those grant statements that you have there, Koivo. Go ahead and hit enter once for me. Yeah, hit enter at the very. All right, yeah, that's perfect. And now let's type. Let's make sure we add in the permissions that we know we're going to want this role to have. So let's do grant create. And then let's use session. Grant create session. And then two. I'm sorry, TO2. And this time, instead of granting create session to our my new user, we're going to go ahead and grant it to the role that we created. So let's do grant create session to developer. And semicolon. And then we also know that we want to grant the ability to create a table to our developer role. So if you just go up one line there, let's write grant create table to developer. And semicolon. And now let's go ahead and replace all of those my new user in quotations there with our developer role. So you should be able to just highlight developer and copy it, and then we'll just paste it right over those, yep, all those my new users there. You can go ahead and get rid of the quotes, that's fine. There you go, and do that for all those lines. And so now what we're doing is we're actually saying, okay, we're going to grant all of these permissions to this role. And then, in theory, instead of having to do all these individual permissions, we can just grant this role to our new users. All right, and then go to the very top one there where it says grant create trigger. All right. So now let's go ahead and highlight all of these commands and go ahead and click that execute script. All right, and then we see that it knocked out all of those grants. And so now if we wanted to kind of prove this, let's scroll up again, Koivo, all the way to the top of this sheet and go, yep. And so we have our my new user that we created. Well, let's just go ahead and create my new user 2. So let's just put a new user 2 after. So instead of, nope, just put a 2 after create, or yeah, you can copy paste it, that'd be perfect. So if you copy paste that whole command, and then just put the number 2 after my new user. That would change the password, but we actually want to make a new user as well. So if you see there where it says create user and says my new user, I want you to put the number 2 after my new user. There you go, that's perfect. All right, and now if we execute this statement, All right, we've gone ahead and created our user, and now we want to grant our role to our user. So now if you just hit enter a couple of times and say grant developer to my new user 2, and semicolon. All right, and let's execute that command. Nope, you gotta go down to our line. So all you did there was try to recreate that my new user, but it's just telling you that it already exists. So I want you to highlight that grant developer to my new user statement, and go ahead and execute that one. All right, and we can see that our grant has succeeded. So now, if let's go ahead and go over to our connections there and refresh our users, and then we'll go take a look at our users. So scroll up and stop right there, other users, right click and say refresh. And then if we scroll down, we should see our my new user 2. And go ahead and click on my new user 2. Click on your my new user 2 there, and let's just say edit. Now over there on the left hand side. Yep, there you go. Right click and edit. And now let's just click on the granted roles. And actually, let's click on the system privileges tab. All right, and then scroll down. And you can jump a little faster if you just want to click right above that. Yeah. Keep on going. So what you see here is, wait a second, I don't see any of these privileges. But if you click on your granted roles, we should actually see that the role is in there. So let's go ahead and click on granted roles. And there we can see that our developer role has been granted to our user. So now if we did everything correctly, what we would expect to be able to do is to just connect as that user and have the permissions that we need. So let's go ahead and click close here. And then I want you to scroll up to your the very top of your connections on the left-hand side. And then all we're going to do is, for my new user, let's create another connection called my new user 2. So right click on your my new user connection and go to properties. And then let's put a 2 after my new user, and then a 2 after my new user name. And then we should just put a 2 after our my new after our password as well. So yep, and 2. And then let's go ahead and test this connection. And hey, look at that, we're able to connect and save. And now just go ahead and click connect. And so what we see here is, okay, we're able to connect. That's great with my new user 2, super. If we click on our my new user SQL worksheet, So the next SQL worksheet to the left. Yep. We see all these commands that we used here. One of the nice things about SQL Developer is you can actually change the user session that you're using on a particular SQL worksheet. So Koivo, over there to the right, you'll see a drop down that says My New User on the right hand side of the SQL worksheet. So all the way over to the right. Yeah, you see that drop down. Go ahead and hit that drop down. And let's select My New User 2, which is the very bottom connection. And now you can see we've actually switched the user session here to the user that we just created. And if we have done everything correctly, we should see that we are actually able to perform these operations without having to do anything. So let's go ahead and create a table.
Here?
So yeah, just go ahead and execute that create table command, the very top command that you have here. Yep. So look at that, we're able to create it. Now let's try and insert a value into the table. So here you can see we we missed this one critical thing here. We forgot to grant our user the ability to have a quota on our table space, right? Now we could also do that as well. So now let's scroll down on the left-hand side to our My New User 2. In our connections on the left-hand side, scroll all the way to the bottom where we see our sys user. And yep, keep going. What we want to do is actually go to our users here. So scroll down till you see users. And then let's right-click on our My New User 2 and edit this user. And now let's go to quotas. And let's check unlimited on users. And click apply. Or actually, before you do that, let's click the SQL tab. And we can see what this is doing is it's saying, hey, let's alter this user and really give it the unlimited permission on that user's table space. And so go ahead and actually do that. So let's go ahead and click apply. And say OK. And now if we go ahead and try to execute our insert command one more time, we should be able to insert. There you go. So now we can actually associate these same things with our roles as well, and make it so that we can just come in and say, okay, I've got a new developer. I'm going to grant them this developer role, and then they're going to have all the permissions that we have determined are appropriate to our developers. And then instead of having to manage the permissions of all of these users on our database, we can just manage the group of users, or the role itself, and not have to be concerned with the individual management of the various users. So this really gives us a pretty good, in my view, a pretty good idea of managing users on the database. Now, there's also this idea of using profiles, and we'll maybe dig into that a little bit later. But we've really gotten into the gist of being able to create a user, grant them the permissions that they need to be able to connect to the database. We've connected these permissions to the skill that we used last week in saying, oh, we know how to create table spaces, and we know that we can assign those table spaces to users. And then we also know that we can grant quotas on those table spaces, specific amounts of space that a user can use on those table spaces. And then all the permissions that create the objects that'll then go into that table space. So we really are getting this idea of, okay, we have control over the storage structures that are on the machine that the database is using, and then we have control over the users and what database structures they can create and where those database structures will be stored. And then we know that we can manage the permissions that we grant our users by using roles and really making that a much more efficient operation. And that's really the recommended method for managing your users is user permissions is to use roles, because otherwise you will create an unmanageable and unscalable mess as the number of users grows on your database. So although one or two users, you might find that manageable, but in a typical deployment where you might have perhaps hundreds of users, you can imagine trying to manage those users individually and what a time-consuming and painful process that'll be. So that's why we use roles, and then we're able to grant and remove those roles from users as we see fit, right? So now, actually, if we wanted to see how to take those permissions away, we can actually, well, let's go over to the users underneath our connection one more time. So over the left-hand side, and let's scroll down. Yep, scroll down right there. And then let's take a look at my new user. Yep. And let's edit that user. And then if you look at our system privileges, you can see that we have this ability to grant all, but we also have this ability to revoke all. So go ahead and click on that revoke all. And now let's take a look at what we see in our SQL tab. And so what this has done is written the individual statements here for to take away the permissions that we've essentially granted to this user. And we can see, hey, we can actually go and revoke all of these permissions from our user. So go ahead and click apply, and let's revoke those permissions. So yeah, go ahead and click the apply button. Say okay. And now let's go back to our SQL worksheet here. Let's switch our where we can switch the user for our SQL worksheet. Here's what I want you to do, though, Clevo, before we do this, because these are kind of session-based. So on your SQL worksheet there, I want you to, where the drop-down says My New User 2 on the very right-hand side, I want you to switch that to My New User 1, or My New User. Yep. So the very top one. Let's switch to that. And now on the create my table there, let's just make that create my table 2. So yeah, just put a 2 after that. And let's go ahead and see if we can execute this command. And so now we can see that we've actually revoked these privileges from our my new user. And so now what I want you to do, Koivo, is go over on the left-hand side for our connections. And I want you to scroll up to your my new user connection. So scroll all the way to the top. Yep, all the way to the top. All right, and then on my new user, I want you to right click. Yep, oh, right click on my new user, and I want you to select disconnect. So we've ended the session our my new user has on the database. Now I want you to go ahead and right click on that and say connect. So right click on my new user and say connect. And here what we can see is because we were logged in already, the system didn't kick us off, right? But we had revoked the ability for our user to create a session. And now when we try to reconnect to the database, we can see that we don't have the necessary permissions to do what we need to do. So we can't even connect to the database anymore. Go ahead and click OK there. And then what I want you to do is click on your SIS SQL worksheet. Yeah. And there where we have our grant developer to my new user 2, let's go ahead and make that just my new user. So grant developer to my new user. All right, let's go ahead and execute that command. Now we can see we've granted that, and now let's go back and see if we can connect over there on the left-hand side one more time. So right click on my new user and click connect. And so you can see there we've kind of successfully removed the individual grants of the permissions from the user. We can see what the effect of that was. And then we just came back and granted the user that the role that had all of those individual permissions inside of it. And so we've made it, one, much easier to manage this user, and we've also demonstrated the idea that we can give permissions to a user, we can take them away, we can grant roles to a user, we can take that role away. And so this is really how you're going to want to manage permissions on a database. You're going to want to make them role-based, and then as users' needs change, you can grant and revoke the roles that they need in order to perform their job, and then also keep your database secure from people wandering around and doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or maybe accidentally doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So that really gives us a pretty good overview of how to handle permissions and user creation, and understand the things that we need to do in order to manage users. Now, one other concept that we should get used to is this idea that you can grant permissions to objects across users. So if you go ahead and click on your My New User 2 SQL worksheet there, Koivo, and actually click on the next one over, the My New User, next one to the left. has all our stuff. Okay, so we have our select star at my table, and we know that we have created this permission in two places, right? So right there where it says select star from my table, Koivo, what I want you to do is put my new user in front of my table. So put my new user in front of my table. So my new user dot my table. And then I want you to go ahead and yeah, delete the just standalone my table there in front of it. All right, and then on the right hand side there where we have the drop down for the user for this particular SQL worksheet, I want you to hit that drop down where you see the little database on the right hand side. And let's go ahead and select my new user. All right, so now what I want you to do is just execute that select command. So select star from my new user dot my table. We can see it has the value 1. Now I want you to change the connection we're using to my new user 2. So over there on the right, hit the drop down. Let's change that to my new user 2, the very bottom one. And then let's try and execute that same command again. So here we're just seeing, oh, wait a second, this table doesn't exist, which this is a bit of a misnomer. The database isn't going to tell you whether or not the table exists. It's essentially telling you for your purposes it doesn't exist because you don't have permission to view this object. So Koivo, if you would go ahead and switch our connection back to my new user over there on the right-hand side. So go up there, hit the drop down, and select my new user. We can actually grant these permissions to other users. So if you would hit enter a couple of times after our select statements, and let's do grant select. And then on my table, to DO, my new user 2. And semicolon. And then let's see what happens when we execute this command. So now what it's telling us is, hey, you have permission to create a table, but you don't actually have the permissions to grant permissions to other people on that table. And there's actually a role or a system privilege that we could assign here. But in this case, we'll just take the easy way out, and we'll use our sys user to execute this command, because we know that our sys user can do whatever they want to. So Koivo, just go over there on the right-hand slide, and let's switch our connection from my new user to our sys on my PDB-1. Yep, so that very first connection down, click that. And now let's go ahead and execute this command, the grant select on my table to. But one thing that's very important here is, okay, because we have switched to our sys user, we are no longer defaulting to the schema that we want to, and so we have to qualify our my table object with its schema location. So if you just move your cursor in front of my table on this command here, Koivo, so go right back to nope. Put your cursor right next to the M on my table. Yep, arrow over one more to the left. There you go. And now type my new user, period. And then period. Yep. And so now what we're saying is, hey, we know we're the sys user. We have to sort of qualify what we're trying to do. We're going to grant select on this my table, which belongs to my new user, to my new user 2. So go ahead and grant or go ahead and execute this command.
Could you say that again?
All right. And, I said go ahead and execute the command. All right. And we can see that, hey, we're able to do that, right? So now let's switch back to my new user 2 over there on the right-hand side. Yep. And then let's go ahead and try to execute that select statement.
This one?
Yep. So now we can see that our my new user 2 actually has this ability to select from the table. But one thing you will notice is that these permissions are kind of granular. So if you, Koivo, go up to the insert statement we have up here, and we put our my new user qualifier in front of my table again. So go ahead and, yep, go right up there and make that my new user. And dot. All right. And now just go ahead and execute this command. You can see that, again, oh, you don't have the ability to insert records into this table. And this is a very handy way. We could certainly grant this permission to my new user 2 if we wanted to, by simply changing our grant statement to insert instead of select. But the idea here is, hey, we can create tables and put data in them and give people the ability to use that data without giving them the ability to alter that data or change it. So there's really insert, an update, and a delete permission that we could grant to other users to give them the ability to perform different types of operations on the tables that belong to us, right? So we have a table created, my new user. We can have our second user have the ability to only select, or that user could have the ability to insert or update values in that table or delete values from that table. And so you see that we can control the access to objects that are placed in other users or other schemas, right? And again, you know, we kind of use that term interchangeably, but we can store our tables in one place and then grant users the ability, various users, the ability to access those tables. And that's typically how we'll do things. We'll create a schema that is where we'll store a number of our application tables, and they will grant various users through the use of roles the ability to perform operations inside of that schema on the objects. So, okay, I think that is a pretty good stopping point for this week, and this will be the basis of an assignment that I'll get out there this week as well. I did put the assignment out today for assignment 4, and that's really focused on creating table spaces and data files and the stuff that we learned last week. And then I'll be putting out assignment 5, which will really be focused on demonstrating your ability to do these type of operations for next week. So as always, you know, you can reach out to me to the various means that we have available, either by Skype or email. And probably Skype is your best bet, because a lot of people seem to have luck getting there. But I will find your email messages as well. Just understand that sometimes I might be a little slow on the draw in finding those. But definitely, if you need help with any of this, please reach out. And then just last thing here, Koivo, let's go ahead and look in EM Express here, or in our Enterprise Manager on Firefox. And let's just see if we can find what we're looking for here. So this is just telling you that it's stopped auto refreshing the screen because you haven't paid attention to it in quite a while. Go ahead and click OK right here. And now let's go up to our security menu, which is in about the middle of the page. Hit drop down, and let's select users. And now if we scroll down here, we should see the users that we created inside a SQL Developer. And you may need to, there you are. So if you click on My New User there, and just click on that user, it should be a hyperlink. And now we can see that, hey, we have this role developer granted to our user. And then go ahead and click on object privileges. We can see we don't see any of those here. Let's click on quotas. We do see that that this particular user has been granted some space on various table spaces. If you were to go all the way over to the right-hand side and scroll down, we would see that our user has an unlimited quota. So go ahead, Koivo, and go all the way to the kind of bottom right there, where we see those arrows, and just scroll down. And then we see, oh, we've got an unlimited quota on our users table space. So we can see that there's lots of information that we can garner about our users inside of Enterprise Manager. So Koivo, go ahead and let's just hit the back button in our browser there, or the back arrow. Yep, go ahead and click that. And now let's click on My New User 2. And now we'll see, hey, this is sort of the same stuff, but go ahead and click on Object Privileges. And here we can see, oh, this user has actually been granted access to a particular object type, a table, named My Table, and the grantor of that was our My New User, and the privilege that this user has on here is select, right? So then we can get a sense of what objects in other schemas this user might have permission to. And so it just points out that, you know, best tool for the job, there's lots of different ways to look at this. It's kind of up to you the way that you want to do it, but there's, you know, it's kind of a lot of overlap between both SQL statements, the SQL developer interface, and the Enterprise Manager interface. And then you can do a lot of the same types of operations inside of all of them. So last thing, go up to security one more time. Yep, and let's go ahead and select roles here. And then if we see here, yep, that's the one. And if you scroll down here, we would find our developer role that we created as well. Go ahead and click on that developer role. And then we can see all of the privileges. We can actually manage those privileges in here that this particular role has. And then you can see, obviously, we can grant object privileges to a role as well, which just, again, takes away this necessity to, manage this stuff at a granular level by the user. We can actually handle this through roles. And then the last thing we'll just kind of take a look at, if you go ahead and hit security one more time, hit the drop down, let's select profiles. And now we can see that there's this idea of a profile, right? So go ahead and click on default. Click on that default profile. And now we can see, hey, there's also a number of other things that we can kind of control through the use of what's known as a profile. So you can actually control the type of operations that a particular user or group of users can do as well, and really have an effect on how much of your database resources that those users can control. And we'll touch base on this a little bit more later, but I just wanted you to be aware of these as well, and think about this idea of as a database administrator, your ability to control the permissions, the type of operations that users can do, and then also the amount of resources that they might, system resources that they might consume as they go about doing the things that they're going to be doing on the database. So, okay, we're going to stop there for this week. Know that the assignment 4 is out there. Be on the lookout for assignment 5, which should be coming here in the next day or so. And then we'll get together again next week and keep moving along.
We still got assignment 3, right?
Yep, we still have assignment 3, which is due on Friday, and then assignment 4 is due the following Sunday, and then you can expect that assignment 5 will be due the week after assignment 4 as well. So we're going to kind of crank through a number of our assignments. If you remember from the syllabus, we had 8 total assignments that composed our grade. We have 4 of them that have been posted, and by the end of October here, we'll probably be through probably 6 of them at that point, and just have a couple to finish up, hopefully well before finals week for you guys, so you can have this course wrapped up and then focus on your finals without having to be concerned about the things you need to get done for this course there in December. So, all right, I will talk to everybody next week, and if you have any questions, you obviously know how to reach out and get a hold of me.